Chris Christie and Rand Paul got in an epic back and forth over the NSA at the Republican debate last night. Let's watch.
Do you really believe you can assign blame to Senator Paul just for opposing the bulk collection of people's phone records in the event of a terrorist attack?
Yes, I do. And I'll tell you why. Because I'm the only person on this stage who's actually filed applications under the Patriot Act, who have gone before the Foreign Intelligence Service Court, who has prosecuted and investigated and jailed terrorists in this country after September 11th. I was appointed U.S. Attorney by President Bush on September 10th, 2001, and the world changed enormously the next day. And it happened in my state. This is not theoretical to me. I went to the funerals. We lost friends of ours in the Trade Center that day. My own wife was 2 blocks from the Trade Center that day at her office, having gone through it that morning. When you actually have to be responsible for doing this, you can do it, and we did it for 7 years in my office, respecting civil liberties and protecting the homeland. And I will make no apologies ever for protecting the lives and the safety of the American people. We have to give more tools to our folks to be able to do that, not fewer, and then trust those people and oversee them to do it the right way. As president, that is exactly what I'll do.
Megan, may I respond? May I respond?
Go ahead, sir.
I want to collect more records from terrorists, but less records from innocent Americans. The Fourth Amendment was what we fought the revolution over. John Adams said it was the spark that led to our war for independence. And I'm proud of standing for the Bill of Rights, and I will continue to stand for the Bill of Rights.
And Megan, that's a completely ridiculous answer. I want to collect more records from terrorists, but less records from other people. How are you supposed to know, Megan?
Use the Fourth
What are you supposed
Amendment.
to? How are you supposed
Use
to?
the Fourth
No, I'll tell you how you
get a warrant.
Let me tell you something.
Get
you
a
don't,
judge to sign
when
a warrant.
Senator.
Go ahead, wait, Governor Christie, make your point.
Listen, Senator, when you're sitting in a subcommittee just blowing hot air about this, you can say things like that. When you're responsible for protecting the lives of the American people, then what you need to do is to make sure that you use the system the way it's supposed to work.
Here's the problem, Governor. You fundamentally misunderstand the Bill of Rights. Every time you did a case, you got a warrant from a judge. I'm talking about searches without warrants, indiscriminately of all Americans' records, and that's what I fought to end. I don't trust President Obama with our records. I know you gave him a big hug, and if you want to give him a big hug again, go right ahead.
Go ahead, Governor.
And Senator Paul, the hugs that I remember are the hugs that I gave to the families who lost their people on September 11th. Those are the hugs I remember, and those had nothing to do with politics, unlike what you're doing by cutting speeches on the floor of the Senate, then putting them on the internet within a half an hour to raise money for your campaign, and while still putting our country at risk.
All right, we're going to cut it off there. We have plenty more we want to get to.
When in a corner, invoke 9/11. One of the oldest Republican tricks. I just got my ass kicked. 9/11. 9/11. I'm against the terrorists. Are you for the terrorists? 9/11. Such a sad, cheap political trick. So clearly, obviously, 100% on the substance, Rand Paul is totally right. Chris Christie is totally wrong. But let me add this caveat here, though. In the eyes of your average Republican voter, what do they take away from that exchange? On that one, I think it's probably Rand Paul, but in a split decision. So it's not a Rand Paul TKO, it's not a Rand Paul KO. It's a split decision Rand Paul wins. Because you got to remember, guys, through the eyes of your average Republican voter, they're not as big into politics as you and I are, and they don't, know all the ins and outs of the Constitution, and they don't know the Fourth Amendment. They really don't care about all that. So what they're really searching for there is, strength, who keeps it together more and whatnot. And on that front, it is more of a split decision, and I think that's reflected, by the way, also in the polls. Because you see, as I mentioned earlier on in an earlier segment, Rand Paul and Chris Christie kind of tied each other, or they were both very low in terms of how they ranked in this debate. They got one of them got 4%, one of them got 5%. In one poll, and another poll was 6% to 6%. So they're not, I think in some they're even at 1% and 2%. So they didn't really do well overall in the debate, and I think people looked at this exchange and they didn't walk away from it going like, oh, that one schooled that one. It was more like, pump your brakes, both of you. We don't like either one of you that much. But Chris Christie, I mean, to get back to the substance here for a second, what a joke this guy is. First of all, he fudged multiple facts there. There's articles out today about it. He said at one point, like, oh, I was sworn in at this job on September 10th. That's not true. It was like December or some shit. So we just made it up. And also when it comes to, the cases he's talking about with, I used the Patriot Act. Fact checkers busted that up too. And as Rand Paul is saying clearly, he's like, dude, the system that we had was a system that worked just fine, and the system we had coincided with the Constitution. The system under the Patriot Act violates the Constitution. People have their rights, man. People have a protection from unreasonable search and seizure, and what you want to do, you could say otherwise, but what you want to do is you support the programs that collect everybody's information and just lump them into a terrorism investigation, even if they're an 86-year-old grandma named Maud who just watches Murder, She Wrote every day and makes apple pies. So it's just not... You're not right. You're on the wrong side, and you're openly advocating for violating the Constitution. I mean, Chris Christie is the guy who said Rand Paul is a, quote, civil liberties extremist. Civil liberties are not debatable by definition. They are rights. Rights are supposed to be not debatable. It's not like, hey, you have a right to free speech, but when you piss off the government and we lock you the fuck up, well, then it's not a right. So civil liberties are only civil liberties if they're not debatable. So to say he's a civil liberties extremist, you know who civil liberties extremists are? The founding fathers across the board. Chris Christie also said you can't enjoy your rights from a coffin. Not here, but this is previous, other stories we've done in the past. You can't enjoy your rights from a coffin. Again, it was a founding father who said, give me liberty or give me death. So your argument is the exact opposite of what the founders said. You're wrong, son. Step aside. And thankfully, Chris Christie doesn't even have that much support from the base. So his ideas are bad, his policies are bad, and he can't get support either, so his politics are bad as well. It's kind of sad to watch.